Lela Pittenger is an intelligent, fiery, and motivating speaker. Her professional background has been with higher education, agriculture, and retail with a graduate degree in dispute resolution and conflict management. Born and educated in Texas, Leela has lived throughout the state and experienced Texas in its great diversity. Always an out-of-the-box thinker, Leela has a passion for finding new ways to solve complex issues that have so divided our nation, while maintaining a conservative approach. Some of the issues that are most important to her are protecting family values, the economy, elections integrity, the takeover of health care, issues with immigration and the border, states' rights, U.S. sovereignty, pro-life legislation, reform of the tax code, and national disaster preparedness. Her hope is to help an uncommon people in extraordinary times restore our nation with their common goals. And before I go on, real quickly, our questions are fairly long, but Fran Rhodes, who's going to be asking Leela the questions tonight, is going to kind of condense it really quickly. And if you want to see the whole question, Leela will have the questions at her table over here. So I'm going to turn it over to Fran and Leela. Is it on? Yeah. Okay. Don't hear that? Great. Okay.
Hi. All right. Now, Fran, I think we should not stand in alignment with each other if we care about these people and their hearing.
I still need to adjust the body. Okay. I'm going to be reading questions. I am not running for Senate. Number one, regarding national sovereignty. The United States of America seems to be losing our national sovereignty as we more frequently seek approval from the United Nations. How can we continue to be a part of the UN and not lose our national sovereignty?
Okay, and then yeah, great, you'll turn it off, that's great. I love when they said that we have 15 minutes for 5 questions, so we're going to solve the world's problems at 3 minutes apiece. I think that's exciting. I think that's a real challenge. It's like the Jeopardy of world programs and problems. So like she said, my name is Lela Pittenger. Thank you for having me here tonight. We have to be quick and dirty, but I will be staying after this program, so you can ask me any questions you want or ask me to elaborate. I do not think that we can remain in the United Nations and maintain our national sovereignty. That because of the way our nation works and because of the way people vote, too often and more than occasionally, we're going to have liberals in there who are going to be more than happy to work with the United Nations and sign over anything they can to spend our money on the problems they think we should be solving that usually are none of our business or not solvable. I think we also have frequently Republicans who maybe have good-hearted intentions but don't always think down the line how every step of the process is going to work with the United Nations. But here's what I will also say. The United Nations is not our only issue when it comes to the fact that our government is signing over our national sovereignty. Back in 2008, when President Bush was still in office, we signed a National Armed Forces Treaty with Canada that said anytime either one of our countries has a national emergency or a civil crisis, then the other country's military will come to our nation to help us deal with civil emergency. Every time I hear people say, we should use the military for our border problems, I say no, because then we have a standing army inside our state anytime our government decides to declare a national emergency or martial law. And people say to me, oh, no, 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 our own boys won't shoot at us. And I say, oh, no, 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 it won't be our boys. They can call in Canada, and there are talks about using the Mexican military as well. You don't have to have the United Nations to sign over our sovereignty. And when our military signed on to that agreement, it did not go through Congress. The Senate is supposed to sign off on every single treaty. It didn't come up for debate. And does anybody remember any senator screaming about that? No. Okay, there you go. We cannot remain in the United Nations and maintain our sovereignty. Let me answer a quick question. How many of you would be a member of a club once you found out that club was not only anti-Christian, but was doing everything they could to shut down Christianity in the world? How many people would remain a member of that club? Because that is what's happening in the United Nations right now. We have different groups and countries that are representing those groups who want a full Muslim agenda. Now what I would say is, I know a number of people who are Muslims. They are not radical, they are good people, they just want to live good lives, but those are not the guys sitting at the table at the UN. Those are not the guys who take our money and then 60 to 80% of the time vote against us. We are giving millions and billions of dollars to nations who turn their money around to radical groups that have no other goal in mind but the destruction of our society. So, Fran, does that answer your question?
I believe that does.
Okay, and there's obviously so much more we can say about this. I would love to elaborate more, but 3 minutes to solve the world's problems. I'm on it.
Okay, question 2 is regarding immigration. The United States has a long history of welcoming immigrants from all over the world. However, because of the size of our nation and the complexity of our borders, it is difficult to prevent illegal immigration. Do you consider illegal immigration to be a significant issue today? And if so, how would you attempt to solve it?
Well, in 3 minutes, actually, I do believe it is a significant problem. I think our biggest problem, though, is our lack of real information on it. The majority of people who are here illegally in the United States right now are not people who came across the border illegally. They are people who came legally with visas and have overstayed their visa, and we're not tracking them. We don't have information on them, we don't know where they are, or we can't keep up with them. Here's the hard thing about being a conservative on this issue. We can say we're for limited government and small government, but in order to track and take care of and deal with 10 to 15 million people, it's going to mean a big bureaucracy. So we have to decide, how big do we want it to be? How far do we want to pursue it? Because the reality is, you are not shipping out overnight 15 million people, especially with our national debt right now. So we do have to have solutions that if we want it done quickly, they're going to have to be realistic, and I believe one piece at a time, and I'll tell you why. When we have legislation that's 2,000 pages long, you might vaguely remember one recently. When we have one that's 2,000 pages long to deal with immigration, what we don't have is a true understanding of the complete repercussions of every single reform that we want to put in. Instead of trying a few things a little bit at a time to track to see whether they really work and hold accountable the bureaucrats who are supposed to be doing it, to have comprehensive reform means we would have a vast amount of reform and hope that all this jelly we've thrown at the wall, something might stick. In the meantime, it's really expensive jelly. So what I would say is, yes, it's a problem. Our problem is not what the media is hyping up. It's not the number of people who are coming across illegally. It's literally that we have more people here who've overstayed their time. Are we ready to track them? Are we ready to take care of it? Because if we want to shrink our federal debt, it means we're going to have to allocate money from other places that we think are important to deal with that. Does that make sense to everybody? Yeah? Great. So I do think it's an issue. I think it's a problem. I think it's a problem the fact that coming across our borders, both with Mexico and Canada, are people from 90 different countries, not just the countries they're leaving, and many of them are from countries that are hostile to us. Now imagine that. I can't imagine wanting to be hostile to the U.S., but they feel differently. And we don't know whether they're coming with bad intentions or because they are also persecuted in that country. We don't know. Because we also have an incredibly slow and incredibly laborious process to process the paperwork of people who do want to come legally. I know people who have been applying, who own their own businesses, who are good citizens, who don't take money from anyone, who provide for their own families, that it's taken 10 years and they still don't have their citizenship because the process is so long and the staffing at the federal level and immigration naturalization services is so small. So we have a lot of things to cover in that, but we need to be ready to say, if we're going to track 10 to 15 million, are we ready for a bigger bureaucracy? Fair enough?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, Fran, fire away. Can I get a wire? Does anyone know? Sorry.
Okay, question 3 is regarding the budget. The United States of America is over $14 trillion in debt and continues to increase at over $4 billion per day for the foreseeable future. Paul Ryan has unveiled his budget, The Road to Prosperity. Do you support or oppose this plan, and why?
Well, I support the fact that it does open up the debate a little more, but I oppose the plan because it's not going to work. Even though it will be cutting $6 trillion from the budget, it will still be adding $6 trillion to our debt. It's not a perfect plan, it's only a start. The reality is we can talk all day about cutting all discretionary spending here in our country. Even if we cut all discretionary spending, we would still be $800 billion in debt for this year alone. Discretionary spending is only 18% of our budget. We can talk about cutting back federal employees, especially since this healthcare law has added thousands of them in the IRS alone. Federal employees, their pay and their benefits is only 3% of our budget. We can talk about, oh, let's get rid of foreign aid. All of our aid to all other nations is 1% of our budget. Here's the big pieces of our budget. Defense is 20% of our budget. Social Security and Medicare, 40% of our budget. If we want to say that we're conservative and we're for small government, we can't make anything untouchable. You can't tell me in the hundreds of billions of dollars we're spending in defense, there's not some spending that could be adjusted, better allocated, stuff that could be taken off of autopilot and actually audited for its effectiveness and its quality of work. You can't tell me in Medicare and Social Security it's perfect. I'll tell you why I know why. I've spent the last 5 years as a full-time caregiver for my husband's grandmother. You want to talk Medicare and getting into doctor's offices and dealing with managing your own personal life schedule as well as your elder or someone you're caring for? I'd love to talk to you about it. I remember very clearly my grandmother, husband's grandmother, God love her, saying when the doctor offered her something that she already owned, she said, well, okay, let's go ahead and get it. And I said, no, Meme, you already own that. She says, it's all right, Medicare's paying for it. I said, no, I am. There is fraud, waste, and abuse in Medicare, and it can be resolved. Did anyone hear about IBM offering to the president to help cut back for free the fraud, waste, and abuse going on in Medicare? And President Obama said no. IBM said they could cut $800 billion in waste. And the president said, no, thank you. Why? Why? Do you really want to ask me why about this man? I'm sure he has his reasons. Maybe it was 2,000 pages long. I don't know. But that's the fact. Look it up. Google it. There's a video of the president of IBM talking about it and how he was astounded. If they're interviewing him through Fox News. We can't make anything untouchable, you guys. We can take care of our own. Here's what I do know. If we don't make adjustments to those big chunks, we will never get out of debt. This $14 trillion debt, in the next 10 years, the interest on it alone will be $7 trillion. So we can have whatever we want as long as possible. We're weighing down our future with a debt that is half interest, that is half of our debt. Adjustments can be made. We can take care of our own. We can take care of ourselves. We can take better care of our health. The reality is, with Medicare and Social Security, the seniors that are currently in our population who are in their 70s, 80s, and above, when they were working, they actually only put in enough to cover 40% of the care that they've received. We're living much longer than we thought, and that's great, but we're going to have to make adjustments for it. No clap on that one. No applause on that one. I know. You know, Jesus says speak the truth in love, but he doesn't always tell you you're going to get punched in the face for it.
Okay, question 4 is regarding the size of the federal government. Constitutional scholars seem to argue over the scope of the Constitution of the United States of America. Proponents of big government cite the General Welfare Clause as well as the power to regulate commerce as constitutional authority. Does the Constitution of the U.S. truly grant unlimited authority to the federal government, as many argue, and if not, why?
I don't believe it does, but that's the wonderful thing about the Constitution is it's pretty basic. They didn't flesh it out too much. They weren't too overly descriptive because they really thought they wouldn't have this problem. I love that old phrase, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. We have a problem with that in Congress. They think they can, so they think they might as well should. Right now, we have so much legislation and regulation in our nation that if you sat down to read every single word of it, if you read 700 pages a day, it would take you 700 years to read all of it. There's that much. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. I do not think that it gives the federal government unlimited power. The 10th Amendment says whatever's not spelled out here is left to the states. The trouble is, we haven't had, over the past 50 years, enough state governors to stand up and say, stop. We have a couple right now. We have a handful, but it's not enough yet. Right now, we have a lot of cases going before the U.S. Supreme Court that we're getting some pretty good reinterpretations of the different amendments to the Constitution that are going to work in our favor, as long as we still have those 4 conservative judges and the one that he kind of dances on the line. If this president gets to appoint another one, forget it for probably the next 40 years. So we actually need our governors and every wonderful conservative or libertarian attorney out there to take every case forward that we can to get the case law adjusted to stop what the federal government is doing. So I don't believe that it gives them unlimited power, but there's a number of people who think it does, and I encourage you to work to vote them out. I'm sorry, I know we're going much longer, but you can't solve the world's problems in 15 minutes. So just really quickly, I want you to think of something else. I know a lot of people talk about term limits for our representatives, the people in the Senate. Here's what I'm going to say about term limits. While it definitely sounds like a good idea, the place we truly need term limits is in the bureaucracy. Eric Holder was not walking down the street one day and President Obama said, "You look like you'd be a fine attorney general." He was in the Department of Justice for 20 years. We had different Republican presidents while he was there, and he was still working his own liberal agenda within the DOJ for 20 years. There are tons of representatives who will tell you that they are told by people in the bureaucracy, "You'll be gone before I will. I'll just be patient." We have to find a way to force turnover in the bureaucracy, because the bureaucracy is this 4th arm of the government that is quickly being used as a strong arm against us by any one person that wants to use it. Right now it's the president. Who knows what it could be? It could be Congress, it could be the judiciary. But that's really our biggest problem is the bureaucracy. You can put term limits on all the senators and all of the representatives, and they'll just go on out while those guys stay in with their plan. I'm very pro-gun. My husband's a hunter. I love guns. I have no problem with it. How are you going to fight that group? You got to vote out this current Congress. That's the best way to fight them, and you got to get conservative justices on every court in the country. Right now, it's being redefined in a very good way for us, and you should be encouraged by that. Thank you.